Okay, we are doing a history of the families on Helen Francis's side and on John Francis's side, and we are going to start with the Marienschek family, which is my mother's side of the family.
Hi, this is the picture that they took over in Germany before my grandfather came to the United States. This is my grandfather here. He was a young man, probably 18, 19 years old when he left Germany. And eventually all of the rest of them came. This is Uncle Tony, who I knew vaguely as a kid. And my my mother's aunt, who was Auntie Anne. And this is my great-grandmother right here holding her baby. I don't know who the rest of these people were. There were 3 other girls, but I really didn't know them.
So how did they end up in New Jersey?
Well, my grandfather came over originally, and then gradually each one of them came over after that, and eventually the whole family came over from Austria, or from Vienna in Austria. The next, let me see. This is my mother when she was a young girl, and she had this professional photograph taken of her, which was pretty unusual in those days. I guess that was quite an extravagant thing to do. Here, don't you just give me these. This is my mom, the same one that you just saw. This is her when she was young. This is my grandmother on my mother's side of the family. She was not a Marienschek. Her husband was the Marienschek. Her name, this is the only picture I have of my grandmother, and she was her maiden name was Lietz. She was from the area of Germany that used to be Prussia, which was sort of the northeastern part of Germany. This is my Aunt Dottie, who was younger by quite a number of years from my mother, and I'm trying to, I think this was another aunt from the other side of the family. This is my grandfather when he was the one from Austria that came over as a young man, and he was in his backyard just taking it easy. I guess he was probably in his late 50s in that particular picture. This is my Aunt Dottie. Now she was the youngest one in my mother's family, and she lived with my grandmother. And she lived in the, yeah, okay.
What's the matter, Lee? Can you just tell us, because we can't see the...
When it's on the thing, make sure it's not crooked.
Oh, I didn't know it was crooked there, Lee. Anyway, she lived with us for many years when I was a young kid, and she was like almost like a sister to me, an older sister. This is my mom. I love this picture because it was a picture of my mother and I think my aunt and another aunt. Yeah, my mother, her cousin, who was on my grandfather's side of the family, and she as a young girl came to live with my mother's family because her father and her mother died and her father deserted them. And
was she one of the? Was she a
this
sibling
was
of
Aunt Margaret. This was Aunt Margaret. You remember Aunt Margaret?
Yes.
Yeah. And but anyway, the thing that I like about this picture is the costumes. These were their swimming suits and bathing caps, and they went to the to the shore with.
Where did they go to the shore?
They went down to the Jersey Shore because we didn't live too far from, well, of course, in those days it was probably quite a trip. But anyway, this is a picture of my mother and Dottie. This was out in front of my sister's house, and I guess they were probably, my mother was probably in her late 50s at that time, and we were visiting my sister at the time. And this is my my mom with my Uncle Jim. He was married to Aunt Dottie, and was a great guy, except for the fact that he was an alcoholic and gave it up for many years, and then couldn't resist and went back to it, and eventually died as a result of the alcoholism. This is a picture that he took of my mother when, somewhere along the way, when he was sort of playing around with photography and that sort of thing.
So that's the end of the...
We are now going to go back and talk a little bit more about the Marienschek family and some of the other information that we had accidentally omitted on the last round. So we're actually going to start with the grandmother, and we're going to start with the grandmother. And
You never panned onto this, so I don't really understand what you're telling me to do here. You can speak to me. You don't have to make motions.
Yeah.
Just say, Meg, could you put up the photographs? There, I put them up. So, Mom, go ahead and talk to Mom.
okay, Mom.
Okay, I've got two pictures up here now, and one of them was of my grandfather. It's one of the few pictures we actually have of him. He was standing by his house, somewhere around in his house. He was probably in his 60s at the time. The other picture is a picture of my mother's family, and this was her mother. It's the only picture I have, actually, of my grandmother, who was a really sweet woman who had a pretty tough life. She came over as a young woman from she lived in Prussia, and she came over as a young woman and somehow got together with my grandfather and married him. And he was a very abusive man, and treated her very, very poorly. His job was landscaping, and so about the only time of the year that he worked was when the weather was good. All winter he didn't work because he didn't want to do anything else but landscaping. He did build himself a greenhouse out in the backyard, and he used to raise all kinds of beautiful flowers, but he never, despite the fact that he got all kinds of accolations, he never ever made any money at the breeding of flowers that he did. He was also, the other thing that he did probably to make some money was he was a bootlegger, and so he made whiskey, and as a very small child, I can still remember people coming and sitting around in their kitchen, and they were sort of minor philosophers talking over all kinds of problems of the day and drinking his bootleg whiskey. I don't know if you have any more pictures.
Did you want to talk about your grandmother and how she took your laundry and?
Oh yeah, well, Meg brought up the fact that my grandmother, because my grandfather didn't really work for like half the year, they were really pretty poor, and they raised their own vegetables, and I remember Mom talking about how they would bury the vegetables out in the backyard. And when my grandmother wanted something to cook for dinner, she would ask one of the kids to go out, and they had a pickaxe, and they would chop through the ice and find whatever vegetables they happened to hit in this pile of vegetables that they had buried. But
Was that because they didn't have refrigerators, or what?
well, no, they didn't have refrigerators, no. And well, they couldn't keep vegetables for a long period of time. So, you know, they had a lot of root vegetables mostly that they had. And cabbage usually kept pretty well. But anyways, food was pretty scarce in that house. And my grandmother used to take in washing from other families and to sort of supplement the income. Because my grandfather, despite the fact that he could have gotten other jobs, refused to do anything else because he considered himself a landscaper, and that was it. Anyway, my grandmother, is in this picture with my mother over here, and her younger sister Dottie, who I spoke of before, lived with us for many, many years. And then this woman was my grandfather's sister and her daughter. My grandmother actually had such a bad life that in her relatively early 60s, she committed suicide.
After all the kids had moved.
After all the kids were grown and taking care of themselves, yeah.